Hello and welcome to the Data Cloud podcast. On this episode, we're featuring clips from all of the conversations we've had so far on the podcast for Season 5. Specifically, our guests share how their organizations are leveraging AI and what we can expect in the near future. To listen to the full episodes of each of our featured guests, check out the links in the show notes. Enjoy.
Sridhar, welcome to the podcast. Now, in your tech career, you've been a software engineer, a technical manager, a business executive, a venture capitalist, a founder of a startup, and now, for the past few months, CEO at Snowflake. You've seen a lot from a lot of different angles. How does the explosion of large language models and generative AI applications stack up historically as a disruptive moment in the tech industry?
It's a great question. And an honest answer is that it's a little hard to tell. I say that because, like when the internet first came along, but it was slow and it grew and it, then grew to dominate all our lives. I was the same with the mobile phone revolution. Pretty much all of the people that I talk to and I believe that AI is a big deal because for the first time, I think we have language models that are just like really fluent in language. And that is the natural way in which we consume information, we communicate with others. And it's the basis of like a lot of how humanity exchanges knowledge. So there's a lot there. So we think it's a pretty big deal. How quickly it's going to come, what's the impact that it's going to have. I think it's a little bit hard to tell. I tell people that, just like it would have been hard to imagine Uber when we first got a BlackBerry or a flip phone, it's going to be a little bit hard to tell all of the things that are possible, but I feel fairly confident that there's a lot packed in here. There's no AI strategy without a data strategy. Because AI is so transformational in letting people use language fluidly to get at things that they want, including data. But more and more, AI is going to also be used to do things like access information, run SQL queries, call APIs. I think of AI increasingly as the glue that's going to bind enterprise software together. So I think us being the data cloud actually sets us up to be at a really great place for them to use the power of AI to bring increased visibility, to democratize the data, but also think of new kinds of applications that you and I are not really thinking about today.
We got the data cloud, the platform. We've got all these applications that are built on top of it. AI is in the applications, but it's also in the cloud, correct? It's also in the platform.
It is best to think of AI as a horizontal layer, as it were, that's going to permeate everything that we do. In my own life, like, for example, I might be using AI to, of course, summarize like this news article that I saw so that I can share it with my friends. I might also be using it, to generate something new, sometimes a fun thing like a cartoon, or I might be using it to feed it a CSV file. I'm not kidding you. I take CSV files, feed it into a model, and ask them questions about that model. And so when it comes to Snowflake, you're going to see AI play a big role in how data pipelines are created, how data is cleansed, how things flow into the system. It's going to be a lot easier to do migrations, for example, because language models are really good at those kinds of tasks. In addition, language models are going to be available to analysts so they can write SQL and transform data. And of course, applications, whether it's chatbots or whether it's talk to my data kind of applications, it is going to span the stack from bottom to top. That's why we don't think of it as belonging to a particular place. It's much more of like AI infusing, AI enabling everything that we do.
Philip, it's great to have you on the podcast. Are you using AI or machine learning or generative AI in your CoPilot product?
We do in many places. So our product and our company as a whole, driven a lot by our CEO Henry, is focusing on enabling and incorporating AI as part of almost every step of the way. CoPilot by itself is mainly driven by AI components, from the point of how do we analyze the data to how we provide recommendations Chorus is a product that we use. There's transcripts that come from meetings. How do we pull that information in to be able to drive these conversations? So a lot of what we do and how we see AI is based, and the reason why we call it CoPilot, because in the old world where you didn't have CoPilot, a lot of the things that you had to do on a day-to-day basis as a customer, or as an AE or an MDR or SDR, people who sell or market on a daily basis, you had to remember a lot of things, and you had to always be on top of taking notes, knowing what happened in the last 5 minutes to be able to act upon it. What Copilot does, it helps you organize that and allows you to shine as the seller or the marketing persona and do the work that you're best at, and take the long tail of things that you need to take care of and automate it in the background so you don't have to focus on.
So in addition to your day job, you're basically kind of reaching out into the startup community and learning what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, and I think it's critical for any role that deals with data and AI, especially in this world today. There's so many things that are popping up. And I'm lucky enough to have the opportunity to be part of groups like Invest in Data, which is a syndicate of data executives, different companies in the SaaS world. And what we do is once a quarter, we look at different startups and we evaluate them, usually pre-seed or post-seed, and we see if what they're trying to solve is helpful, and then evaluate their ability to solve things for us and our companies. So it's a great mechanism for us to learn about the market, learn about innovation, and bring it to the companies that we work for.
We talked before a little bit about AI kind of relative to your product, CoPilot, but I wanted to talk more broadly about it. It's been a year and a half since these generative models, generative AI and large language models, really started kind of capturing the popular imagination. Lots of news articles, lots of debates, lots of predictions, all this kind of stuff. It seems like a real turning point in technology, computer science, business, even society. How do you see this? What kind of capabilities do you see coming as a result of these technologies that we couldn't do as well, or maybe even at all before?
I see two camps of people. Ones that treat it as something that can be treated as a doomsday, in some sense, that we're losing to the battle of AI or whatever it's being called, and another camp that sees it as the next industrial revolution. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. At the end of the day, the way I see this, at least in the short term, it's a productivity boost tool. A lot of people use ChatGPT or any of its competitors for multiple use cases. When you write things, it helps you write them a bit better. When you learn things, it helps you structure that learning experience a bit more. When you write code, back to the Microsoft Copilot example, it helps you write it more efficiently. In our example of ZoomInfo, sellers and marketing managers now can do their work more efficiently at a higher quality in less time. So the way I see it is that, at least in the short to the medium term, I see it as a productivity boost tool. In the longer term, there's this concept called AGI, artificial general intelligence, which I think is something that hasn't been defined yet. I think it's an evolving term. It used to be treated as something that a Turing test is basically the way to evaluate if something is an AI or not. But we already passed that point. So that's one way to look at it. That's how the doomsday camp would look at it. But I think the other way to look at it is say the Turing test by itself is an evolving test. If you are aware that the environment now has these LLMs, then now the Turing test becomes a harder test to pass. So it's something inherently that changes as we go.
So now we talked a bit about how you're using AI at ZoomInfo, specifically with CoPilot. Talk a little bit about more broadly, what are the use cases within the company?
So there's a lot of use cases that, as you mentioned, are targeted towards our product that we're building and part of our offering. On the corporate side, I think there's a lot of initiatives that are being done right now that are sort of a playground that at some point will be integrated into the product. So if you think about it, we use ZoomInfo's internal employees sort of as guinea pigs for some of the things that we want to implement in the product. Because at the end of the day, we also have a sales org, we have a marketing team, we have different personas at the company where we can test out the different initiatives that we're doing. And there are multiple initiatives that are currently in flight that are being done, from being able to have account summaries, helping salespeople understand what is the journey that the customer went so far, and being able to empower our AEs and AMs to do the work. And I think one of the things that are great about this new world is that if sellers or marketing managers or anyone or CSMs jump on a call with a customer, there's a lot of information that can be gathered out of these conversations, much more than what you would gather through a questionnaire that the customer would respond to. And
Gotcha.
I think all these interactions that happen today, and I think that's the great part about what ZoomInfo is heading and doing in the CoPilot piece, is how do you look at all interactions that happen today in your funnel, collect that information, and be able to drive insights. And these insights are not just for how you go to market. These insights will be helpful for the product team, because at the end of the day, if you were on a call with a customer who mentioned 4 items that are related to how we can improve the product, and because the person on the call has so many things on their plate, they're not able to capture all that information, CoPilot captures that information and provides that as feedback to our product team, to our CSM team, to our sales team, and helps us as a company improve on an ongoing basis.
David, welcome to the podcast. Now, it sounds like the big transition you guys are on is to really becoming a data-driven organization. What does that mean to you, and especially in the context of WeightWatchers?
So we have tried, I think we have tried not to be data-driven. We've tried to be data-informed.
Oh.
And I think that nuance is important. And I think that if you go to a lot of places, they'll say they want to be data-driven, and you get to meetings and people can't make decisions because they're waiting for the data to show them the pathway forward. Mm-hmm. And we should be informed by data. We shouldn't be making decisions in a vacuum, and we shouldn't be making them purely on gut. Absolutely. But we have autonomy in these decisions. We own them. And to give up our agency to data and allows people to push off those decisions and not really own them and just be like, the data said. Mm-hmm. The data should be part of that decision. And the data should inform those decisions, help us figure out trade-offs. But data's never going to remove uncertainty entirely.
Yeah. I love that distinction that you've made. And it kind of goes to our moment, the AI moment. Are you going to give up? Are you going to be an AI-driven company? I think not. Maybe AI-informed. Yeah. I understand that you have been deploying some large language models, particularly in marketing. So tell us what you're doing there.
I think LLMs we're primarily actually using a little bit outside of marketing.
Oh, is that it? Okay.
Yeah. We're starting to experiment with them with some of our customer service applications. We've also have a very large food catalog. And I think one of the things that becomes a challenge with food catalogs are things like, how are these different foods related to each other? What foods are made up of what other foods? And that kind of taxonomy is one of the places we've started to work LLMs into our process. And they've been particularly good at trying to find relationships there.
Looking out over the next year or so, what are the big trends in data management and data analytics that people should be watching closely?
Where I do think particularly LLMs are going to start playing, I think you're going to see a better first tier of self-service. I think self-service is always tricky. Everyone dreams of a world where they're going to be able to ask a novel question and something's going to answer it.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily see that coming for organizations that have thousands and thousands of tables, but I do think generative AI is going to find its way in, and people are already starting to explore with data there. as costs inevitably come down, which is what I've seen, and as more features get built into this, you're going to see people explore things that they couldn't have before. I think that, Snowflake continues to make it easier for us to ask questions that we wouldn't have asked in the past. And that means we get to go innovate and do things that we wouldn't have done before just because it was too hard. Whether it's the sequelization of LLMs, of programming, many of these things that were restricted to who in the org could do them based on skill sets they have is being brought down to like a SQL layer that most analysts can kind of understand.
Claudine, it's great to have you on the podcast. I understand that you've described Talking Points as an AI-first organization. What do you mean by that?
We consider ourselves an AI native solution, meaning that our approach has been centered on AI. I would just say more broadly on using technology that helps to solve the problems of our users and partners since we launched in 2015. And that has very much included AI from the very early days. So we consider ourselves experts in leveraging AI for good. It powers our day-to-day approach, our product innovation, our impact research. So as an example, AI powers our ability to translate talking points into over 150 languages. And we are able to do that using custom machine learning models that build on our own human translated content, as well as a lot of investment in breaking down hard to understand terminology that is specific to the US education system that makes it a lot just more possible for those who don't have that background to navigate our US education system. And even we who do speak English fluently can have difficulties there. So all of that is super helpful and effective.
So you've been using technology, including AI, from the beginning, from 2015. But in the past year and a half, we've had this revolution in AI with large language models and generative AI and chatbots. Are you using any of that stuff?
We absolutely. Some of the things I didn't mention earlier actually are using AI to mine our conversations, understanding topic quality, sentiment, things like that have really helped us to launch features or to build on our own understanding and therefore launch features that really help to guide best practice conversation towards improved student outcomes. We also recently launched a solutions incubator that allows us to experiment, particularly with AI features in kind of rapid cycle development and learn. So some recent things that we've done are creating ability to have personalized, culturally relevant engagement that's tailored to the unique needs of students and families. Things, for example, such as using AI to create personalized activities for students to do at home with their families based on specific criteria such as topic, area, curriculum standard, or learning goal. So for example, if a third grade teacher has a student struggling in math, they can fill out a short profile and AI will instantly draft a message to the students' families with a grade level appropriate activity to continue learning math at home. And it can even tailor the output to specific standards such as Common Core or state academic standards. Another AI innovation is our ability to drive in-the-moment guidance on best practices. We have a new generative AI feature called Message Mentor, and we've trained this model using the dual capacity framework and other research on best practices that we've built over time. And it allows educators to craft messages that are positive, that are asset-based, that really reinforce and support building a positive partnership with families, even when they're having to have more difficult conversations about things that a student might be struggling with. As you imagine, the benefits are wonderfully impactful to educators, and we're so excited about what the future holds with the just rapid progress in LLMs and their ability to give us more and more features and functionality in AI. The reality is that teachers can't work any harder and burnout is an all-time high. They need effective tools that make their jobs easier and lighten their loads. And it's really important for us to be able to use those to foster trusting relationships between family and school and remove barriers to family engagement, but also guide the nature of those relationships towards behaviors that research shows will have the most impact on student learning.
Duncan, it's great to have you on the podcast today. Duncan, in the wake of COVID, global supply chains and supply chain management software have been tested like never before. You call it an age of uncertainty. What kinds of uncertainty are you referring to, and what can we do about it?
It's a great question, Steve. It represents a generational and structural shift in how supply chains are being tested today. And it's driven by both the demand side and the supply side in terms of what's creating this uncertainty. On the demand side, over the last 20 years, we've seen a massive shift in consumer behavior, right? That's been driven by the rapid growth and adoption of digital technology. So it's e-commerce, personalization, on-demand services, all of those things, right? And fundamentally, when you think about e-commerce, supply chains weren't designed to efficiently ship like single parcels in the last mile to someone's home. Right. So that demand side is caused a lot of structural shifts in it. But the bigger disruptions have occurred on the supply side, and if you think about it, over the last 20, 30 years, world supply chains were powered by, using China as the factory for the world and a labor arbitrage play, and this notion of globalization and just in time, right? And what the pandemic exposed and all of the regional friction we have with China is that's not going to work in going forward. So it's had supply chain executives step back and say, how do I solve for this? And when JP Morgan did a study of the S&P 1500, and what they found over the last 2 years is that working capital's gone up by 40%, right? So that's over $500 billion of fundamentally inventory people have added to their balance sheet to try and be more resilient in response to a supply shock or a demand surprise. And our perspective is that's not the answer to resiliency. The answer to resiliency is software, right? But a new breed of supply chain software that in our world is fundamentally enabled by Snowflake.
I understand that you're building your suite of cloud applications on top of the Snowflake AI data cloud. Why did you pick Snowflake as your strategic partner?
So, if you think about all the challenges I talked about earlier around the age of uncertainty and the need for a new paradigm, we're very, very fortunate because there's been the emergence of sort of revolutionary technology over the last few years, right? The rise of artificial intelligence, and not just Gen AI, but predictive AI and machine learning and all of that. The rise of cheap and abundant robots, right? And then lastly, the rise of the data cloud with Snowflake. And when you take those three things together, it's basically a new canvas on top of which to reimagine how supply chain software should work to enable this new world. How do you deliver resiliency and sustainability and profit without trading them off? And, I talked earlier about the fact that supply chain applications are very, very siloed, right? You have different application topologies across the landscape, and they're all sitting on data silos. And you end up moving data around and doing transformations. There's a lot of latency. There's a lot of inefficiency. And because the volumes are so enormous here, you end up with a lot of batch, right? And just means companies are not as agile as they should be. And that's the fundamental thing that Snowflake allowed us to shatter that paradigm by almost creating a single database for the world's supply chains that solve that problem at scale.
Kallol, welcome to the podcast. You mentioned the company becoming agile, and you also mentioned the kind of the AI revolution. And, both of these things are happening at once in this company. Of course, they're happening in the world as well, or AI is anyway. So I understand that you have recently been promoted to head of transformation for the company. Now, why did the company launch the transformation initiative, and what exactly is your role there?
At Spark, we have been across the transformation landscape for last 10 years of various kinds. Okay. And my background is I led out transformation in various companies. So I had a global role earlier, and I went across the world to do IT business transformation. Now, where the telcos are going worldwide is they are becoming more like a cloud AI company because the network and IT are going to cloud, and most of the capability seems to be AI enabled. So it seemed natural to bring the AI and IT parts together in the company to unlock the customer experience change, which will enable growth, and also the people experience change, which will enable better productivity. And to bring that together, there is a technology component, but there is a bigger business change and people change component attached to it because it needs the business process to change in the company. and also the reskilling that needs to go along with the business process change. So this amalgamation of data, AI, IT, and business process together to make that leap into future is what the mandate of the transformation program or the function is. And that's what I'm sort of fortunate to get that role to take facilitate this change inside Spark in the next few years.
Interesting. So there have been kind of waves of transformation in the past, and this is kind of the most recent iteration created by the opportunity of AI.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you see the way the AI is evolving is there are like billions of dollars getting into the research and development of the core AI capability. And there is a chat GPT or GPT version coming every year.
Right.
But for that to be useful in the company, you need to change how the data works, how IT works, how the business process works, how the people work. And I think that will be the differentiator, because the core capability will be there, but how companies are able to bring that together to realize the value will differentiate them than the rest in the market.
I understand you have taken the brain technology and you're using it across the enterprise, not just in marketing, but also in customer service, HR, finance, sales, network operations. How do you take that functionality that was designed for marketing and apply it to all these other uses in the organization?
So if you see, and this is where the evolution of AI is happening.
Yeah.
So previously there was predictive AI, which can predict. So in finance, like finance forecasting or forecasting demand um, in people. I think they were anyway. There were uses of that in finance and HR. There is also supply chain forecasting, which also is enabled by AI.
Yeah.
What we are seeing is that generative AI coming up has created additional advantage to these functions, because it's like the left brain, right brain. The left brain sort of creates the predictive modeling, and the right brain then, with its search capability, brings in the search of these functions to not only these departments but also the rest of the organization, and then helps them to engage them in a much um, easier way. For example, like when you query HR about a question, then there is a search function which can search the HR database, and then it creates a CoPilot type answer for the HR person to answer. So, and we see this growing where this predictive AI and the generative AI combinations will knock a lot of benefits in these support functions in the organization.
Yeah, I got it. Now, this is a massive application of technology across the enterprise. Where are you in the process of completing the transformation, and what's the next phase?
So there's a great question: is when does transformation ends? And the way the world is moving, I think transformation is an ongoing function. It will never end, because by the time it finishes one thing, it will go into the other.
So there's all this excitement about large language models and Gen AI, but there's a lot of other AI out there. I mean, more traditional machine learning and things like that. What do you expect to be the major AI trends over the next year or so, or even further into the future?
So predicting the future is very difficult in AI world, like next 5 years or some service, or what will happen in 5 years. But in the next, we can already see some of the themes like multimodal, which is image, text, videos, audio, all coming together. So that's probably where some of the advances of AI is. Like you should see the new 4.0 demos or the new capabilities coming from various other big AI vendors.
Yeah.
Second, I guess, is with that, I think the NLP on using natural language to talk to anything, or talk voice or chat, will become very prevalent, right? So, and that will disrupt how UX or CX is in this world. So everything probably will be natural language. Even coding is becoming natural language enabled. Those two will then lead to the next question around ethics and how the governance of AI works. Because if AI is becoming so pervasive, how we are doing it in a responsible way. So there will be probably more thinking and capability coming up on that area. But then while there will be controls, it will create a huge demand. And the demand will be what we are seeing is data centers, electricity, computing power. So there are some information around how much power is getting consumed through the new data centers. In fact, there are instances of some cities, most of the electricians are now working on data centers because it's going at a rapid pace. So there will be a sort of crunch around power and how we use that responsibly, because it looks like Kabul is the new coal mine of the new industrial area. Like for electricity, power, coal was needed in the industrial evolution. It seems for AI, you need computing power, computing and power. And this will evolve. The pace of change is tremendous. And I think that there will be some supply demand and some balancing of ethics and risk, which will continue as the march of AI starts.
So we're coming to the end of the podcast, and we typically end on a lighter and more personal note. And I understand that you have a daughter and that you think a lot about how AI will affect her life. So how do you prepare your child for that world?
I really don't know. But that's what I'm trying to figure out. What is going? Well, how can I help her prepare? Like my daughter is 7 years old, so in 12 years she will be in the workforce. So what will workforce look like in 12 years? And I have some themes like, whatever happens, critical thinking will always be useful. Like we humans have come here because of critical thinking. Possibly that probably will help any place, like even 10, 15 years, that will be very important. So developing those faculties in children will be very important, like problem solving, critical thinking, but also possibly with the growth of AI, I will see specialization becoming very important. Like you need to be really expert in something. It doesn't have to be work, but it's expertise in something, because that's probably going to be a differentiation. But I do wonder is that maybe we can't think about that because we are our way of thinking about purpose is life than probably what somebody's growing up and being a toddler or being 7-year-old would be, because our purpose of life has been always linked to the work, and for many of us. But maybe that's not true for the generation which will come in, because they will have so much productivity advantages of not only AI, but robotics and other things coming up. So maybe they will have a more rounded view of the world and they will find their own meaning and place. The only thing I'll say is that, this is so uncertain. Our parents could have guided us some way, like, oh, you should do that and this. I don't know. We will be in that place. They probably have to figure some of this out themselves.